What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Barbells and Trails podcast, episode 79, as this week we dive into the unexplored past of humanity. I guess would be a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Are there ancient civilizations that we did not know about, or we did, but didn't actually realize it was older than we thought?
Or we just haven't found yet.
All the above.
Exactly.
So we were doing a deep dive on Graham Hancock and his theories and inquiries. So today, I brought out my glasses.
Oh boy.
As we really dive into this. No, don't take yours off. Wait, we're trying to look smart today.
Fine.
So it's glasses time, I guess, as they say.
4 eyes.
Well, you were wearing glasses here before me. So, if you guys don't know, I guess we can give a brief understanding of who Graham Hancock is. I mistakenly, at one episode, called him an archaeologist, and somebody went off on me in the comments.
Are you serious?
Yep. He's not an archaeologist. Sorry, he's an investigative journalist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been studying and writing for 40 plus years. Probably more than that, honestly, because I think he's in his 70s. And over time, he kind of came across the idea that there have been hints at possibly being an older civilization before, I guess, like ancient Sumeria, when civilization really first erupted that we know of and are taught in everyday schools.
He thinks it was like a very expanded civilization that we haven't found yet.
Yeah. So there's, like, he hinted at it in his books in the 1990s, and at the time he was shot down very heavily because a lot of science just wasn't done yet on a lot of things. And actually, in the past 30 years, a lot of the stuff he talked about has, in some ways, and with certain stuff in particular, has kind of been proven that there is more than meets the eye when it comes to the actual history of humans and everything involved with it. So it's a really, really fun topic. But so you are a little newer to the idea. I kind of put you onto it last year a little bit. So I made you watch his documentary series and listen to a few episodes. What was some of the first things that stood out to you personally, I guess, that you thought was like really intriguing and that you just didn't know or think about?
Of him or
just a little bit of everything. Like, what did you think of him? What did you think of?
So I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast with him on. And, I mean, I kind of talked to you about this off screen, but, like, he's just so invested in all of this that he knows, like, anything, basically, that...
He knows a lot. Like, he knows more than some scientists.
Like, Joe would just ask him some random, regular guy question, and he would know the answer to it.
Oh,
like,
go crazy.
Some random name that was from freaking 1,000 years ago.
Yeah. Like, the dude, honestly, has a lot of knowledge, and that is the bad thing with his points. Is a lot of people are like, oh, well, he doesn't have a degree in this, he didn't actually study this, why do you believe him? And that's where, for me personally, it's like, I don't think that just because you have a degree means that everything you say should necessarily be checked off as like 100%. That's correct. Because you can, especially nowadays and with the internet and everything out there, you can learn quite a bit on about any topic without actually doing any, I guess, mainstream studies.
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of talking about this on the Joe Rogan podcast because he was not trying to shut them down and saying they're all wrong, the archaeologists, but he was just saying, like, they're so narrow-pathed.
Yes.
Like, this is how it is, and it can't be changed.
They're not open to the possibility.
Yeah, but then he was saying, like, how he actually knows this, all this knowledge and all this, and then he was just like, what's the word? I don't know. I forget the word, but anyways, he was just saying, like, they're all narrow path, and, like, he knows this, and it's just, like, a lot of these types of people, like nowadays, you can find out that some of them not right, 100%.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely been things, and there always has been.
A particular word I'm thinking of, but I forget. But
yeah. Like, one channel I happen to like that kind of dives into some of this stuff sometimes is Y-Files on YouTube. And they do similar stuff where they're like, you got to understand that the whole point of science is eventually being proven wrong. Like the whole point is to keep your open minds and keep growing, expanding, and science is wrong. We like just now, like ancient science, we're like, you're sick, throw a leech on your arm and suck out the bad blood because that's what you do. Or there's three fluids in your body, what were they called, biles, and that's how the body's like system works. And so it's like over time you're supposed to find out more and more information, and old stuff is supposed to be written off as like, oh, that was just something we just didn't know at the time. And I feel like with archaeology, that field in particular is very slow on adjustments to new possibilities and new discoveries. But so I guess we could do a deep dive. Basically, Graham Hancock believes that there is an ancient civilization way older than we originally realized, that eventually at one point possibly got wiped out and kind of reset humanity after a cataclysm.
Yeah, way more smarter too than
very possible.
Any other.
And even then, he's not even in some of his aspects. He's not necessarily saying that this was like a civilization that was to our standards or necessarily more. He's just also saying that there was an advanced civilization way or thousands of years before we first think of civilization really expanding and becoming a thing. And so the typical mainstream study or mainstream stuff that like history we're taught in schools is like, okay, we were hunter and gatherers for a long time. Civilization didn't first start coming into existence until we developed agriculture, and all this happened in like Afghanistan and ancient Sumeria, and that's when the first civilization started to erupt, and we start building big stuff and really building a society. That's what like you're really taught. And anything before that, there wasn't anything. We were still running around with sticks and stones and trying to kill a deer. And that's basically it. And there's a lot of things in the past that we don't totally have any information on, or we hadn't for a long time, that basically every year it seems like more and more stuff comes out about it.
Yeah. Or we just find something new.
The first thing that he's talked about that kind of helped prove him when it first got discovered, which was at this point 15 plus years ago, was Göbekli Tepe. And we talked about this on live stream. We've talked about this a few times, but it was a place that was discovered in Turkey, and it was one of the first places that had monolithic, a very complex monolithic structure that was dated back to over 12,000 years ago. And it was the first real proof of being like, hey, someone built this 6,000 plus years before ancient Sumeria was founded, pretty much. It became a thing. And it was one of the first things like, oh, maybe there's something we don't know. And it was kind of one of the first things to really, really push towards this outcome of people actually diving into it. And so, and that site in general is really interesting, and we'll get to that a little later. But so I watched Ancient Apocalypse shortly after it came out. What did you think, or what did you find out that you found really fascinating when it comes to that documentary series in particular?
Okay, well, there's just a lot of information.
There is.
So I can't really pinpoint.
Or I guess what was the most fascinating thing that he talked about that really caught
every episode he would do, he would basically kind of focus on one place.
Yeah.
But I forget what the very first episode was about, because you and me watched that.
The first one was, I believe, in the Philippines, and it was basically these crazy, like, symmetrical column cylinders that were built in this hill, and it turns out that the complex was way bigger than they had initially expected.
Oh yeah, was it a pyramid, kind of?
So yeah, it was some form of structure.
Yeah, I remember
temple.
now. There's like actually chambers maybe down there.
Yeah, and they use LiDAR.
The government, yeah,
a lot of stuff that way.
The one thing that actually kind of just intrigued me was when they went to the Bahamas, and they were scuba diving, and they saw a road. I mean,
something.
It was maybe it wasn't a road. I mean, people found this like in the 80s, 70s. He said, but people thought it was the
Atlantis.
Thank you. Yeah. People thought it was that, but me personally, I don't think it's the Atlantis. But
no,
there's definitely. I honestly think when they were doing the whole overall like scan and putting like the images together, I was like, "There's something down there."
Oh, there,
100%.
Yeah, and so that's also the thing that's very interesting when it comes to a lot of stuff with that one in particular is like that it also makes it really, really hard to try studying ancient civilizations because the only real way to date stuff is organic compounds. And when things are made out of stone, you cannot date that. And so like with that, it's like, okay, we see these stones that obviously look laid out. It's called Bimini Road and Bimini in the Bahamas. And it's like, okay, there could have been other structures on top of this. This could have been a baseline for something. There could have been wood. There could have been whatever. We don't know. Like it all would have disappeared, got rotted away. It's in the ocean now.
Right.
And so like that one is really a mystery because we're like, we don't know what this would have been used for exactly. But that, like, I think the first episode I listened to him was on Rogan. That's how I found out about him. And this was like his episode in 2019. And I had no idea who he was. And just finding out all this stuff, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, wow. Like, I never thought about any of this, and now my mind is just, like, running, and I'm like, I've always been a history nut, so it was already super, super intriguing for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, even now, like, within the past couple years, humans, like, the date of humans, even on North America, has been pushed back farther. Like, initially, they were thinking a few thousand years ago, now they're thinking tens of thousands of years ago. Even some of the stuff he talked about, which wouldn't necessarily probably be a super ancient culture, but this even shows more recent past that we lose is like the Amazon rainforest. And that was one thing he talked about. He didn't talk about that in the documentary series, but he talked about that on Rogan, and how the Amazon in general is so complex with like just not knowing, and that there were stories of cities here, all this stuff from explorers initially, and even something I didn't realize for a long time was like in general in North America, we know that almost 90% of the Native American population got wiped out from disease. Yeah. As a kid, I never knew that, and now they estimate that there could have been damn near 50 million people that lived in North America before Europeans ever settled here. And it's like, never knew that. That's a lot more of a culture and society than I ever would have imagined here initially. Yeah. And they think something similar like that was in the Amazon, with cities possibly housing 1 million people. And they just keep finding more and more structures using LiDAR that things just got consumed by the rainforest. Yeah. And got covered.
We just not know until we actually just start exploring it.
Yeah. And when he talked about it, it was like one of the big places that at the time, and it's starting to be studied more, but had rarely or barely been scratched the surface of when it comes to archaeological. Basically, archaeology was like studying it. Like it was one of those places that hadn't been studied. And I think one of the first times I listened to him, he's like, "There's 3 places archaeologists have not looked at. It's the Amazon, and it is massive. The Sahara Desert, and basically like coastlines, because of like ocean and stuff being lost to the ocean." But it's just, it's such a fascinating topic. It really is.
Amazon always just fascinated me, like even when I was younger, because it was just, yes, I honestly kind of believe that there's probably was one or if more just civilizations there. I really do believe.
Oh yeah, there at this point it's basically been proven, but it's like there's been books and stories about it, and it's like we don't know for certain, but there easily could have been large civilizations, large cities there. Explorers went up the Amazon. One of the first things they did, went up the river, and because of just even a handful of people going up there, could have spread disease that then caused mass famine and disease in the communities. And within 100 years, the jungle could have easily consumed it.
I'm surprised you actually didn't know that, like, disease wiped out most of Native Americans.
Not for a long time. I didn't. It was never talked about in school.
Honestly, how I was taught was like we came over, and that's kind of, we brought more diseases and more stuff that they didn't know about, and that's
okay. So I did know that. I did know that, but I didn't know the extent of it, how much it actually hurt the Native Americans when it comes to like the amount of people that passed, let alone knowing what the initial population was. Like when I think Native Americans, I think small tribes. I think like that's kind of what it's taught. Honestly, it's very 100%. Vague, and it's like, oh yeah, there's people here, but there's not that many. Like it's whatever. We took over North America.
But like actually,
there's a lot. There's a lot of people, and there was still millions after disease wiped out a lot. But
100%.
it's just crazy to think about, like, okay, so we came here, imagine with just easily, let's just say 10% of the population than the people that were here 100 years prior. And it's like, honestly, if that would happen, guess what? We probably would not. United States would not be what it is today if there was 50 million people here initially when, and disease didn't have such a major impact on it.
Yeah.
But I think personally, watching his documentary series, I think the episode I found the most interesting was the crazy man-made city underground, and I think it was Turkey. That one was that was something I had barely heard about but never seen, and then they did that episode and I was like,
but
what?
When they started showing it, I was like, holy crap, this is actually amazing.
Yeah, this is ridiculously complex. It goes hundreds of feet into the ground and all this stuff. But so I guess we could get into I guess what the theory is. Like, we've touched base on it in other podcasts, but I guess we can kind of break it down a little more.
Just going back a little bit. Just like when Graham Hancock was started talking about like the land bridges, because there was probably very possible everything was almost connected or was connected. And when they showed that it was a map, I asked you what his name was, and then
Perry Reese.
Yeah. And then him showing actually the marker of South America going down, and it was connected to another piece of land, and everybody's like, that has to be fake. Nobody even explored there. Then when they started exploring that, they actually found more like evidence that people actually lived in Antarctica. People actually lived there like before we even knew it.
Yeah,
that's what intrigued me.
That part with the map I did find really interesting, because when I first watched it I was like, wait, you're telling me we had maps that showed a continent, showed Antarctica hundreds of years before it was actually discovered.
Yeah, it was just like that nobody knew of.
And
that's what was like very surprising. And then he had that one big island, and that's what most like people think it's fake, because they don't think there was an island there.
Yeah, and that's what's the mystery is, like, we can't go back in history. We can't. We can only find so much out ourselves because it was so long ago. But it's like the creator of this map literally talks about using source maps that are way older and a bunch of new information, and basically combining them all together to make a world map. And all that's left is like 1/4 of it on the very western side. And at that point, that would have been South America. And so it just shows that, and then showing the representation of what it would have looked like 12,000 years ago. Because I think that is something that most people probably are taught slightly, but don't understand how different the world looked 12,000 years ago in the last ice age, and how different maps would have been, and how major of an impact the world itself would have looked like, between where climates would have been set up, between how much land mass and what land masses were shown, what either wasn't there that is now, or the other way, whereas stuff that was lost to the oceans.
And put that in perspective, like, just try going back 200 years ago, or like when we first like came to North America. That's when you actually start getting into like, yeah, it's changed a lot. Like, the world has changed so much that we have no idea. It's insane.
And so, like, that's part of their theory, is that there was basically a lost civilization during the last ice age, and that in that time frame something caused a massive shift. We know this geologically. Like, we know the ice age ended, that the sea levels rose almost 450 feet in a reasonably quick time. Weather changes, everything, and then the climate warmed back up, and basically has been where it has been since, and what we deal with. And for a long time they didn't know what caused it. There was a bunch of theories to why and all this stuff, but it's like something we got to realize is literally 12,000 years ago. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was something like there was 3 million square miles plus of land mass that isn't here today because the water rose, and that's something we don't think about. Like, it's talked about shortly nowadays in a more modern sense with global warming, and be like, oh, water levels are increasing because more glaciers are melting and all this stuff. But it is hard to comprehend that literally during the last ice age, where we live today, there would have been a giant glacier 2 miles high that stretched from central Indiana to the North Pole.
Very possible.
A very similar situation in South America. And the amount of ice is tremendous that I don't think we really grasp it, or most people don't, to really understand that the world just looks so different. And at this point, I guess we can kind of dive into their theory as to what happened. But basically, he thinks that there was an ancient civilization that basically got destroyed. And there might have been some survivors that helped basically
build up more civilizations.
Help build and start and kickstart what became our civilization in certain ways.
A lot of people don't like his idea because he goes off like mythical legends and stories. And actually, that's intriguing to me.
Oh, it is.
Because
I love it.
If you can get basically the similar story on the whole opposite side of the world, that's not a just. That's
that's the thing. We talked about it with Brian, like when it comes to the flood myth, and it's like it's shown in over 200 cultures around the world. Between that and many cultures, and he talks about this in the documentary series, have basically a story of origin that is based on something, in their eyes, a god coming and basically supplying knowledge that they didn't know, and teaching them to farm and teaching them to domesticate animals and livestock, and how to build, and teaching them astrology and how to study the stars and all this stuff. And so basically his mind is that this ancient civilization got wiped out. There were some survivors, and some of those survivors realized their society is never going to come back. So, like, let's try spreading our knowledge to as many people as possible. And they could have literally traveled the globe, finding hunter-gatherer societies and teaching them these different technologies. And when we say technology, it could literally be as simple as, hey, this is how you plow. This is seeds grow these. This is the way to find a benefit, or not benefit, but basically find a sustainable source of food instead of having to struggle.
It could be from farming to all the way to like how to build a freaking pyramid too.
Yeah, I mean it could be a lot, like how to teaching them art, how to carve and cut stone, and
because
even become a thing.
Even that's to this day still just surprises me how they even build any of those kind of structures. Because there's just of course there was a way, but in my mind there's just no way, you know.
It's fascinating. It really is. And like, even let's say if we go into like Egypt, we don't know the actual date of the pyramids. Like they will say it was 4,500 years ago, but it is really weird when you have a lot of people talk, and how if you actually go to the old kingdom to the new kingdom and work your way through Egyptian history, that their craftsmanship and everything actually gets worse, and that's really weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
And not only that, but like how precise and the science behind the pyramids, and like how they're made, and how they point direct north, and like absolute north, and like all this stuff, and the diameter makes up the circumference of the earth or something. Like there's a bunch of crazy stuff like that, and everything.
You saying that, and then they went to some island, and it was a site, and they don't technically know what it was because it's all broken and all destroyed, but they noticed that these were the people that studied the stars, and they built it somehow to see the brightest star and everything. Dude, that was insane.
I think that was Malta.
I forget.
Yeah, and they focused on, I think it was Sirius, was a star.
Yeah,
and,
they worshipped that, right?
Well, maybe not worshipped it, but they felt like it had significance because it's the brightest star in the sky and stuff like that. And it shows, like, even in the Aztec civilizations, like, they were very well renowned for their studies of astrology and understanding the stars and studying the stars and tracking them. And it's like, okay, well, either they developed that on their own or they learned that from someone else. But there's a lot of evidence in a lot of different cultures all around the world that there was astrology was very, very well studied in a lot of different structures. And, like, let's just go back, I guess, to Egypt, but, like, the Sphinx, like, this was something never totally thought about it. Like, but the Sphinx in particular, some people believe is really, really old, and that there is some proof to it when it comes to erosion. There was erosion marks, and people were like, oh, well, that's from, like, sand and wind, and that's why. But so I can't remember who it is, but there's, I think, somebody out of Boston that's a geologist and studied this, and he's like, it's that doesn't look like sand and air erosion. That looks like water erosion, and that wouldn't make sense because it's Sahara Desert,
right?
But if you look and you think about how much rainfall and stuff would have to cause that, if you go back on basically an earthly clock, there was a time 12,000 years ago that the Sahara was very green, and it was more of a jungle than it was a desert. I've heard of this story too. There was lakes, there was rivers, and the climate was completely different to what it is today, suggesting that this could have been built way back then and had been there for a long time, been eroded and rebuilt. And some people believe that the original head of the statue, which, if you look at it like today, the head is not proportional with the body because as the head of a pharaoh. Some people believe that the original head was a lion in representation of the constellation Leo, and that at that point in time and in that area, that also would have lined up with that same time frame of when the Leo constellation would have been a major constellation in that area in the sky, and that they would track those different changes, and over time the head got wore off, and then someone came through, and what we know of the Egyptian culture today came through and changed it to a pharaoh head and reconstructed it.
Interesting.
And that's also a thing that's been proven with a lot of aspects, that some of these structures have been renovated over time, I guess would be a way to put it, where even in our history that we do believe and know of, that there have been these pyramids and structures that have, over time, they had to update it and rework on it because it gets wore out. Like, I mean, like, if you just left a building and did no work to it, decades later, it will start to fall apart and have issues. You have to redo work.
Yeah, like, it's just like your roof on your house.
Yes, like, you have to fix things and redo it. It's not going to be the original thing. And so he thinks that with some of that's kind of what happened. He thinks that the possibility of the pyramids and some of these things were already here, and another culture, which became the Egyptian society, ended up moving there, living there, taking over and assuming these locations, these places, and these giant monuments, and making them their own in certain aspects. And they were already here, but they changed it to their culture, and they changed these things. So it's like, when you see these hieroglyphs, technically they could only be 4,000 years old, but what if this was built way before and they just added their writing to these walls of these buildings that they found that were already constructed, or something along those lines?
Just never know.
And that's the thing. It's a very hard subject because you can't necessarily have definitive proof. Like, there's really no way to do that because over time organic material falls apart. And when you're looking on a time frame of possibly 10,000 plus years, you're not going to find a lot. And things are lost. And so it's like, when they try dating the pyramids, the way they're doing that is they're finding little bits of organic material in between some of these blocks and being like, oh, here's this piece of wood from when they worked on it that dates it back to this time. That doesn't mean that's when it was built. It's an estimation. Like, it's like, oh, well, that just means it was probably worked on at that time. It doesn't necessarily mean that was when it was constructed.
I mean, building a pyramid is not a fast job either. So anybody saying that's just.
And also with like mainstream idea, they believe that the Great Pyramid was built in like 26 years. It is like how that's a lot of stone. It's like over 2 million blocks, weighing tens of tons. And even if you tried doing a project like that today, I don't know how quickly it could be done. I really don't, especially being that precise as well.
Even with the tools and stuff we have, that would still take so much time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just getting it just perfect.
Yeah.
Angled perfect and everything. That's what just surprises me.
Yeah.
They did it without equipment that we know of.
Yeah, without our forms of technology.
Yeah.
And that's where it's kind of interesting, is they think that it could have been a very advanced civilization, but they don't know if they went down the same technological line. Like, it doesn't necessarily, like, literally in a video game where it's like, oh, you can branch off and do, like, in a strategy game or something, it's like, oh, well, we're developing these kind of technologies to push us in this direction. What if they didn't necessarily come up with combustion engines and go that route? Maybe they found something else that is possible. We just haven't noticed it because we got stuck on combustion engines. That became our main way.
Exactly.
But we might just now be finding out some of these studies, and like when it comes to vibrations, like we also know that there is studies that you can move objects with sound. It's very possible.
Mm-hmm.
And some people think with some ancient writings that that's how they could have possibly built it. We just don't have a full understanding of it. Like, there are ancient texts of saying like things were built because they did this, and this stone was moved because of these sounds and these noises and whatever. It's like, sounds crazy, but now we actually have studies to prove that that's possible.
That does sound crazy, but also stone weighs a ton, so that has to be loud.
Well, not necessarily loud. It's a frequency that does it. Like, everything has,
but still,
it's different than what you think. But you can look it up, and
I know what you mean. It's like, what's the word?
It's just crazy to wrap your mind around. Yeah. But I mean,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. So it is just very interesting. And then not only that, but like, I didn't know this either, that in certain Egyptologists, not all, most don't believe this, but there is actually some written history talking about kings of Egypt and that area that stretch back 40,000 years. But most Egyptologists say that it's all wrong and it's not true, and that all of it's a falsehood, and they don't believe it. But it's there is documentation of stuff saying this, and it's like, why are we just throwing it out? Because just because it seems wild does not mean that it might not be true.
Right.
Like, there's a lot to it. But I guess what was your favorite location? Like, I did like in his documentary series that he even focused on some stuff in North America, because I mean, like the Serpent Mound in particular, not far from us. We could go visit that. And it's in Ohio, and how I think there's other stuff in Missouri or Mississippi. There's other stuff, but mounds have been a thing. Was it Mississippi? I don't know. Somewhere south.
Yeah,
somewhere south.
Yeah, you're right.
And just like we can't necessarily date that kind of stuff back, but one of his big things is obviously the serpent is supposed to point towards the summer solstice, I believe, sunset, and it's supposed to fall on the head. But if you look, it's not direct. But if you go back and you track when the sun would have lined up from Earth's tilt to line up with the serpent's head, it would have been about 12,000 years ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say, probably, yeah. Huh. I forgot about that part, actually.
Yeah. So so it's just so much, because there is a lot to it, but it is just wild. And basically, I guess we can get into the theory of what they think caused the end of this civilization. Because did you get to that part in the documentary?
Was on the very last episode.
Possibly.
I might have not have.
It was what episode were you on? Was it
I was on the very last one.
Was it 8?
I didn't.
Number 8. If so, that's really when they get to it, because that's the thing. It kind of builds up to the end. And
I think I might have started it, but I didn't get all the way through.
Okay.
I think I know what it is.
Well, basically, they bring in Randall Carlson, and he studies
no, I didn't get there.
geological aspects in the soil. And one of the things that he saw that kind of set him down this path originally years ago was the Missouri River Basin. And he's looking, and he's like, this really looks, from where he's standing, this giant cavern. And at this point, it's kind of been proven that at one point, the actual river that flowed through here was 1,000 times, was 1,000 or 4,000 times the size of the Missouri River.
I believe that, yeah.
And if you look, it looks like the banks of an eroded river, ancient river, but massive. And similar things have kind of been found in, I think it's Oregon, Western Oregon or Idaho, in those areas. The original theory was like there was basically an ice dam that would break and cause this lake to wash away, and eventually it would refreeze and wash away, and this happened 40, 50 times to cause this. Randall Carlson doesn't agree. He thinks that something like this happened very fast, and there was a lot of water, billions to trillions of gallons of water running through here.
Just in that one,
very fast.
Just in that one place?
One place in particular.
Okay.
But it is really interesting because you go through here and you see these giant canyons and you really don't think anything of it, but it's like, we know how canyons form. Like, look at the Grand Canyon. It's from a river basin.
Mm-hmm.
It's from water. And
that's true.
And the thing is where they're standing in this canyon, it's wide and it is massive and it's tall. And it doesn't quite make sense. And one of the things they talk about is like stones that are in this area and certain things that don't quite make sense, or how they got there, or why are they here. And so he thinks that some of these stones would have been in ice and in glaciers, or from farther north that literally got washed down into these areas because they're just massive boulders. And there's really no other way to be like, oh yeah, that's there. Like, it just didn't come, like, it didn't just appear. Yeah, like so it had to get there somehow. But we're also talking about boulders as big as my house or larger,
right?
And everything. So the theory is that obviously ancient civilization got wiped out, but what caused it? At this point, the running theory is the Younger Dryas impact theory. And this theory basically states that around the time of 12,000 years ago, roughly, we came across this meteor stream. And many meteors and meteorites basically struck Earth, either physically hitting, or some could have been, what were they called? Sky bursters or something. And we've seen this. We've witnessed this in our lifetime. With the Tunguska
like barely
event.
But yeah.
And if you remember, I think it was like 2011, the meteor that was above Russia that shot down, lit up the sky, and burst and caused injury to over 1,000 people.
But that was not worldwide like danger.
What?
That one meteorite, or those meteorites just falling down on Earth.
No. Well, are you talking about like recently or?
Recently,
oh,
yeah.
Yeah. No. But,
so like you saying that, yes, we kind of, but then again, I don't know.
But it's basically what air bursting. That's what it is. Basically, where a meteor gets so hot as it comes into the atmosphere that it literally implodes in the sky and just blows up.
I see what I mean. Okay.
And one of the biggest impacts or air bursts that's been studied and found to date happened about 112 years ago, roughly. It was early 1900s, out in the middle of Siberia. Not many people knew it happened because not many people live out there.
Yeah.
But there's still trees down today, over 1,000 square miles, flattened, gone. And they basically think that this meteor flew into the Earth's atmosphere, blew up thousands of miles in the sky, or thousands of feet in the sky, and just sent a giant shock wave flattening these trees in the surrounding area. And if you look up the pictures, it is wild because it's
really?
Like an entire forest just laid down.
Just flat?
Laid down.
Wow.
And it's insane. And the thing is, if something like that would have happened above a major city, thousands upon thousands, if not millions of people would have died. And that wasn't necessarily a super large airburst either. So basically they think that when it comes to causing that giant shift in Earth's climate, that these airbursts and some strikes appeared around the world. Some people would be like, well, why isn't there basically impacts that prove this? And they think that at the time, most of this was more congruent with the northern hemisphere, mainly around North America and possibly Europe, that basically just happened where a lot of these could have struck the icebergs and these giant ice sheets and were airbursted and still caused fires, eruptions, and all this stuff. And they think that that's what caused this extreme melt of water to cause the erosion out west, and that when it struck, it just melted. I mean, the heat and the impact would have just destroyed this. And the crazy thing is they've even studied that there's these like weird pockets of, I guess you could say like weird like little impacts scattered on the eastern United States. Don't totally know what the hell it would have been from. Someone's actually went through, looked at the trajectory, and it points towards northwestern USA. So they think that something impacted into the ice and literally sent basically shards, giant chunks of ice flying across the globe, or at least the continental United States, basically like ballistic missiles, and they just landed in these areas. And if you look, you could see some of them just on Google Earth, because when I first found that out, I was like, I want to look, like I'm curious. And you see like little like spots, and they all seem to kind of have a similar enough trajectory, and they're littered
just
all
one
around
direction.
the Carolinas.
Yeah, that's weird.
And stuff. So they think that something hit the ice, sent giant chunks of ice flying across the country pretty much, and just splattered all over the East Coast.
No, we don't know, I guess. Jeez.
And all this stuff, and caused this massive flood, wiping out a lot of North America, rising basically sea levels globally, and all this stuff that would have flooded any cultures that were on these low-lying areas. And even today, I don't know the actual percentage, but a large majority of the human population live on coastlines. And so why would we think that it would be any different then? Because it's easier for transportation, it's easy for food, it's easy for commerce. It makes sense. Right. And so they think that happened, and after this, we went to extreme freeze for about 1,000 years until it finally warmed up. So between all of these different impacts, basically different situations, a lot of humanity was wiped out. And so these civilizations were just lost. Because like if you look geologically, you see the temperature drop very fast, going to like Florida being in like the 20s. Actually, I think it was lower than that, probably like negative 20 within a week. And basically causing a freeze that lasted 1,000 years and all this stuff. Basically this would have wiped out that ancient civilization. They think that this is also tied into the giant die-off of major fauna in the United States, because at this point, the only leading theory to why a lot of these animals went extinct, like the mammoth, the giant sloth, the cave bear, the American lion, like all this stuff, like we had lions and cheetahs, we had all sorts of stuff here initially, and their whole thing was like, maybe humans hunted them to extinction. I don't know about that. I don't know how many humans would have been killing a lot of mammoths, like.
It's just, you just don't know back then, I guess.
No, you don't, but at the same time, it's like, when you really think about it, would you really be willing to go try fighting a mammoth for food, or would you go find a deer or bison?
Well, I mean, if you were in
a small village, like,
I mean, that's the thing. Mammoths are probably easier to kill, just because deers, they're just gonna run away. And back then, they don't have friggin' guns. They might have bows and arrows, but
that's true. But at that point, bows and arrows weren't technically invented yet.
Yeah, so that's even like that even helps me even more. I'm just saying.
Or you say it'd be harder to
catch a deer? Yeah, 100%.
I agree with that. Like, it'd be a lot easier to hit a mammoth than it would a deer. But imagine going and fighting an elephant with a spear.
Well, get about 20 people, which I would bet if you wanted to kill something that big, you would.
True.
All spears and
but
poke along.
I know, but the thing is it wouldn't be easy.
Oh,
the
100%.
likelihood
I know.
that someone wouldn't die is pretty low.
Oh, yeah.
And so the whole thing that someone brought up one time is like, imagine you were in a village and there was 30 people and you had 15 adult men, let's say, or well, 10. We'll say 10. Do you want to take 10 guys to go try taking a mammoth to get a lot of food, or go and hunt something not as dangerous that you could much more easily take out? Because if you only have 10 people, you're over there and you're like, we could go for the mammoth, but 2 of us might die. Or should we go for something that might not kill us necessarily? And so I had never thought about that, but it's like, it's very true. I don't know if I would really want to be taking on a mammoth, in all honesty. And one thing you don't think about, though, too, is a mammoth would be harder to kill than an elephant, also because of the fur. 100%. It almost acts as a form of armor in some way. If you're just throwing a sharp object.
We actually had mammoths back, like, to this day.
They're bringing them back.
Maybe.
Oh, no,
they actually
are.
I heard it, but
yeah,
is it actually in progress still?
Oh, yeah, they're trying to do basically make an embryo in the Asian elephants and possibly make.
I was gonna say
mammoths.
I heard them doing something with elephants,
which is wild.
That would be wild, honestly.
And then someone did bring up, and I did think about it, and I guess it would depend on the size of the village, but it's like if you did kill one mammoth, that's a lot of meat that you don't totally know how you're gonna be able to store it. Like, I mean, that's thousands of pounds.
There's just tons of stuff we don't know how they do whatever they do. So maybe they found out how to make a refrigerator. We don't know, dude.
Yeah, well, it's just going off of like the basis of it was just hunter and gatherers here, and it's like, okay, well, if that's true, like the amount of people it would have taken to hunt mammoths to extinction is very unlikely.
Yeah, and
so this cataclysm even points to an answer to why a lot of the major animals in the United States died, pretty much in North America, and that would make sense. It would in that aspect, because if all these things, meteorites struck this area, it'd wipe out a lot, everything. And
so something catastrophic definitely happened.
Yeah,
and wiped out most of everything.
And some of the ways to prove this is they have found basically a layer in the soil of trinidite, and not only that, but a lot of ash, basically saying that possibly because of these explosions and meteor impacts could have possibly caused volcanoes to erupt and cause massive fires over a large portion of North America.
Where did you say exactly this was at?
Where?
The explosion.
Oh, they don't know in particular, but they think it would have been on the northwestern coast somewhere, like somewhere up where the ice sheets would have been.
So there's volcanoes up there?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's the Ring of Fire.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
but they think that because of something like that, causing a lot of geological mishap could have also caused earthquakes, could have caused volcanoes. That's the thing. It could have, because of something that major, it could have had a very large impact on Earth's natural systems, and caused wildfires as well, along with everything else. And basically, trinidite is, at this point, it wasn't first discovered or studied really until the first nuclear test. That's why it's called trinidite, is because of the Trinity experiment after one of the first nuclear tests in World War II. Mm-hmm. And basically, the only way to get this is from a very, very high heat in a very quick succession. And so there's really nothing else before nukes that would show anything to do that besides an impact from an object from space. And the thing is that there's been layers of this found all across North America and even parts of Europe, but nowhere else. But it's all around the same time frame. It's all
that they have explored, though.
What do you mean?
They have explored, like they have only found it in those two places, but they still probably have.
Oh no, they found it in a lot, but like they've kind of mapped out the range that it's been discovered. So
I thought you meant it's just those two places.
No, no, because when it first got discovered, people were like, wonder if that's over here. A lot of people have dug up, and there's sites everywhere that they've been able to just basically dig down and find this layer.
Could be. Yeah.
But so there's just a lot to it, and I mean, like, I mean, what was your thoughts on some of it?
I
like,
mean, that just right there is interesting. I mean, it just, I don't know, like actually having asteroids coming down and doing it such an impact that wipes out millions of things is just insane. But I don't know, coming from a Christian perspective, I don't want to get this totally wrong because I haven't read the whole Bible, and when I even read this part I was really young. But I mean, God just said he flooded the earth. But I mean, yes, I feel like, of course, I think there was a massive flood. But honestly, the possible of like something else happening before the flood is very just open. Like, I'm really open-minded to that.
I mean, like we said, even on that topic of biblical studies and science, whatever's written about the universe coming into existence, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean, in my eyes, that still couldn't have been the Big Bang, but that was then caused by something else. So when God flooded the earth, it doesn't necessarily mean that he just made it rain for a long time. Yeah, I mean, he could have done something to cause.
All he said was he opened the gates down below and made it rain. But like, honestly, he didn't really give a deep down explanation, or the Bible really does. The Bible is kind of vague in a lot of areas. So
that's the thing, is there's so much interpretation that can be done off of that.
Yeah.
That it's like, okay, well, it could have been this flood that was then caused by this, and that's what happened.
But I do believe there was a massive flood.
Oh yeah,
100%.
I mean, at this point, it has been proven, and so it's just crazy that there's so many places possibly undiscovered in the oceans all around the world.
100%. We haven't explored anything in the ocean. Literally anything.
And that the Atlantis, most likely at this point, was a real place. We don't totally know where. There's multiple theories.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I want to talk to you about that.
Okay.
So, did you ever hear? I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but did you ever hear about the Atlantis being in the Sahara Desert?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it being like such a dense forest back then, I mean, it's very likely like that's probably one of the most tropical places it was. Mm-hmm. It was probably more tropical than the Amazon right now.
Yeah.
Like back in the day.
So I've heard that one. That one's really good theory, and I think that could have a lot of merit because it's not been studied. But there is one place, I can't remember exactly where it was, supposedly in the Atlantic off of Europe somewhere. Randall Carlson's talked about it, that there is an island that would date back to this time frame that basically disappeared very quickly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he thinks that might be the more likely outcome of Atlantis. I can't remember all the details for it, but he does talk about it. It's one of his episodes where it's just him. It's not Graham and him.
Have they ever tried to go to that area?
It's very deep. That's the problem. Is it's not.
I mean, yeah.
It's not really.
I didn't know if they even tried to get in a submarine or anything.
It's hard to explain, but if I remember correctly, because I listened to this a while ago, his theory and at least his understanding of the geological stuff that changed there was basically in a short time frame. There was a lot of tectonic plate action caused a lot of earthquakes, and basically the seafloor changed directions and basically just caused this island just to basically sink very quickly.
Oh, did it sink or did the water rise?
No, it sunk. But also with Graham Hancock's thing, it could have been a combination of the two. This could all happen from that same event. Like I said, so something like that could have caused earthquakes as well that also disrupted a lot of things, caused tsunamis and done everything. So
I want to believe that the Atlantis was real. I
think it is.
I want to say I think it is too.
I really just do think it is. It's just I don't know if we'll ever be able to have a perfect understanding of where it is, because the thing is, like, let's say it is the thing Randall Carlson said. If it did completely end up in the ocean, and it's been down there for thousands of years, there isn't going to be anything to find. Besides maybe some stones, but that would be about it.
It's just a bit of structures just like that, a lost city in the ocean. It could be, well, I mean, that was probably, I don't know what the time frame was at. But
I don't know either.
In between of those two, but yeah.
And so, but that's also the thing is like when we think of like tsunamis and earthquakes in particular, it can completely level a city and not leave anything behind very fast.
And back then they don't have records. So
exactly. And then that's also something that's really crazy is like something that's even more recent history. The Library of Alexandria. There was a lot of history in that library that was lost. And there could have been older texts that we didn't know about that could have helped push and prove that there was an ancient civilization. But because of that, it literally lost and set back a lot of technological events.
I mean, that's like that goes back to like the city of Pompeii too.
Like something like that. Like they didn't know it existed until the 1900s, I believe, or maybe 1800s.
Something like that. Yeah.
Like at one point, even people at the time were like knew about it, but it kind of got forgot about in history for years, and that's something that's reasonably easy and recent in comparison. And so it just shows that some sort of catastrophe can completely hide and destroy possibly in certain situations that didn't necessarily, but it at least covered it up where we didn't know it was there. No one knew it was there.
So that goes back to the show.
Yeah.
Like them just seeing these like the pyramids, but it's all covered up in grass. So you technically would think it's actually kind of just a big hill. But when they actually start drilling in and making tunnels.
Oh, the one in Mexico.
Yeah,
yes,
one
that
in
one
Mexico.
was really cool.
That one was like, holy crap, because they actually built a church up top, right?
Pyramid. Yeah. It's literally the world's largest pyramid. It's not as tall as the Pyramid of Giza.
Yeah.
But square footage, it's the largest. It's been shown that over time, the pyramids were built on top of another pyramid. And it got bigger and bigger. And then by the time the conquistadors arrived, it had been covered. And they had no idea.
Because I remember Graham Hancock being with that one guy. And he was saying that there was miners. That they were actually miners back then. And some guy from him actually found some tunnel system that led to other tunnels that they had no idea about. And then Graham was like, so did you guys ever go back there? And he was like, no.
Yeah.
I was like, are you serious?
Yeah. It's crazy. And then so part of it that's really cool too is so like they believe that this comet thing wasn't necessarily just out of the blue. They believe that this was caused by the Taurid meteor stream. We actually pass through this meteor stream twice a year, in November and June. And so the bad thing is that one of the things that they try to talk about and preach is that this could still be a possibility. Something like this could happen. And the thing is, we are to the level of advancement. And the funny thing is since they first had some of these conversations and some of the conversations I'd listened to, we literally have disrupted an asteroid's orbit to change it. And we've proven that humanity can shove something out of the way and change direction. And they're like, this really honestly should be a topic of discussion and something that's actually studied, because if NASA and other countries came together to basically watch out for spatial, objects that could possibly collide with Earth,
right,
that within a handful of decades, we could have an impact, change the trajectory of these asteroids, and them never be a possibility of wiping out Earth, and possibly resetting civilization again.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of crazy to think about that one, we could have that kind of impact as a society to be like, hey, we know that this is a possibility. We're just going to shove you guys out of the way. Just knock them just a bit so they're never even a threat. And they're like, we don't know, but there's a chance that something like this could happen again. And that's part of it, is also waking humanity up to being like, hey, this could happen. Because it did happen. And all this stuff. And that's where, like, with Göbekli Tepe, let's go back to that in some of the carvings, some of these different carvings talk about astrology. They talk about watching these specific stars, this part of the sky.
Yeah.
Some of it literally could be almost like a way to date back to a specific point in history, talking about when this happened. That's what's also crazy.
What actually surprised, like, not really surprised, but just opened my eyes was back then there's actually no air pollution, or not as much.
Yeah.
And so, like, they could probably see the sky so much better than we could to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And when they talk about astronomy, like, in the brightest stars, and that's what they, like, that's what their god is and everything. That's just...
He thinks that ancient civilizations had a lot larger connection to the cosmos in the sense of understanding the stars and kind of being attached to it, where it's like us, we're not attached to it really. It's like, oh, I'll go outside on a clear night and I'll be like, wow. But
hey, that's the Big Dipper.
We can't see the Milky Way, not where we live. You can in certain places, you can go out and see it. That's what's wild. Is you just sit there, naked eye, just see the vastness of this.
It's insane.
And even Rogan's talked about how he's like, I think honestly something like that humbles you. Same with even like looking at a crazy mountain range or living next to the ocean. You see the vastness of the world, and it kind of puts you into perspective. Yeah, so it's like if you could see the cosmos every night, you would probably look at yourself so much differently, because you'd be like, I'm very insignificant to existence. Like, this is wild.
I'm so small right now.
yeah. It is crazy to think about. But so it is really weird that like all these different places point to some astrology and to a specific time frame. That one was really, I found that one very interesting, and that in particular, like, go back late Tepe on the one column basically does point to a specific date. Practically, if you look at the stars and you chart it, it's basically somebody writing down a time frame on a calendar and being like, around this time this happened, let's not let it happen again. And that also points to the underground cities that we talked about, and how he thinks that some of these people knew some of this information, so some societies literally were like, this could happen again, and they basically built bunkers in case of something.
Whole cities
underground, being able to find water 150 feet below the earth, which honestly doesn't, I mean, not saying it's not possible, but at the same time it's like, how did they know that there was a spring down there?
I was like, how did they know
that they could do this? And then also being sophisticated enough to understand air ventilation systems and doing all this. It's because insane, the mainstream says that this culture built these in case of basically marauders and invaders, that they would just go in there and lock the doors and be like, sorry, you can't get us, and just hide in these caves. But it's like, I don't know, it's a lot more complicated for someone to spend that much time and dedication to build something just to hide from somebody. And it seems like
that is not that.
Yeah, like that's a lot of effort just to be like,
you would rather,
we could get invaded. Let's build this and just hide.
It's more like, let's build a wall. That's usually what
you would do.
Like, encase yourself, actually. Maybe make some defense.
A little easier. That's a little easier than digging these tunnels and being able to store thousands of people, livestock even, and all this stuff. And then also what he found out, that there's tunnels that actually stretch to another underground city. I don't know if do you remember that? Where it's like, there's another one 10 plus miles over here, and it's connected. And it's like, what? That's a lot of work, especially if you imagine doing it that by hand. So what gave them that reason?
Even that surprises me, dude. That's mind blowing. There's no, I don't know, dude. Like even going that right direction and getting connected with that other tunnel.
Oh yeah, that'd be hard.
That's even more interesting, you know?
Well, unless they built the tunnel first and then decided to put the
build the tunnel, then build the whole city. I mean, I guess,
but even then,
that's a lot of work, dude.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, okay, what motivated them to do that? That's
even then,
thing.
Why was it 8 miles long?
And especially for a culture like that to be like, we should spend a lot of time doing this, especially when time, resources, and energy should probably most normally be used to survive, not necessarily
And you knew that took generations.
Yeah, exactly.
That took
So it's like,
generations.
okay, if typically
It wasn't
that point
just
is like you're worried about your survival.
yeah.
Okay, if they built this, they were worried about their survival for a different reason.
And I was just say it's not like it was just a group of people. It was like just got up one
Yeah.
day and was just like, hey, we should do this.
Let's
No, it
build
was
down.
it was a planned thing because it lasted for generations. Like and generations
most
kept
likely,
going.
yeah, yeah. And
Well, it has to be generations.
if not, at least a large amount of people
Yeah.
were working on it. It's one or the other, and even then, it's like, yeah. Like,
how do you
like I'm
get
saying,
that group of people just to be so
motivated
willingly-
on one project?
Yeah.
like that. Unlike, let's say, like a monument, it's like, oh yeah, let's build this for our city. But like to build this,
underground city, that takes a lot of work.
and obviously it seems like it was motivated for survival, but I don't understand why between the time, the effort, and the complexity that survival would be based on in case of an invasion of some form.
And they just knowing how to just make structures like it won't cave in on them. That's
well,
another
that
thing.
was the weird thing, was that part of it was, in general, the type of stone was very malleable but strong. That was what's really crazy. Is it was also like the perfect area to do something like that.
Yeah.
But it was just really crazy, and that was one thing like I'd heard about, but when I first saw it, I was like, "What?
Yeah,
like this is crazy."
They're like, do it here. All we have is clay. You know?
Yeah, true. We couldn't do that here.
It was terrible. It would be terrible.
But so there's so much, and I think it's a fun thought experiment. Not saying like we said, not necessarily saying any of this is 100% true or accurate, but more and more data is moving in that direction. So to completely write it off would also be the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people seem to do that, and they talk about him being a pseudoscientist and all this stuff, and it's like, I don't think so. There's definitely something to it, but even if some of the theories of like the impact and some of it is wrong, there is definitely something here that's missing, and we haven't totally figured out yet.
100%. I feel like there's so many civilizations that we just don't know.
Yeah,
there is.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
There's different tribes. There's different anything, dude.
There's been lost cultures in the past 1,000 years, so why would it surprise us there was some 12,000 years ago?
Exactly.
And so it's just fascinating, and then the geological evidence that comes out, that's where it's like, okay, like this, there definitely could have been, obviously something had a major impact on the world we know. So if there was a civilization that we didn't know about, it would be gone. Like there's no denying that at this point.
Yeah.
It's just, we just don't know the extent of this civilization. We don't know a lot about this civilization, but there was most likely something, because it is kind of weird that at this point, I guess, atomically correct humans, the date for us is literally being pushed back. Where like 50 years ago, they're like, yeah, we've maybe been around like 20,000 years. And it's like, okay, so it took us 20,000 years from basically being nothing to cavemen to developing what we have today. That's pretty impressive, let alone building the pyramids, doing all this in that time frame. And then now they're like, actually, anatomically correct humans might be like 800,000 years old. That's a lot more time in history that we don't know about.
That's just a big gap.
So it's like, what could have happened in 8,000 years if we basically built what we have today in 6?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot that could have happened, and we just don't know, and that's what's so fascinating about the subject. So I do recommend that if anybody's listening to this and they don't know a lot, and obviously we're probably not digesting this in the best way, but we're talking about it with what we know and what we find interesting. But I 100% suggest somebody, because most people have Netflix, check it out. Like really, like honestly, check it out. Like there for a while, it was one of the #1 shows on Netflix for about 2 weeks. And listen to, even if you don't like Rogan, whatever, listen to some of those episodes with him on, because it is very, very interesting.
At least listen to the most recent one.
Yeah.
The 2023 come out.
Well, that's the thing. He's come on multiple
Yeah, I
times.
know. I
Yeah.
had to scroll down. I just
Yeah.
want to find the most recent because I knew he talked about it,
Mm-hmm.
because there's little clips of him on the show.
Yeah,
Like
and
Joe Rogan.
that's what's interesting too, though, is honestly maybe even go back to like some of the first ones, because you listen to him, and it's like now, if you go back to those, that was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff he's talked about at this point, there's been information come out of on
Right.
it. So it is interesting. Like the date of civilization itself has gotten pushed back. The date of humans being in North America has gotten pushed back over the past 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, like we said, we thought it was a couple thousand years ago, land bridge, that was it. And then it's like, oh, in all honesty, people could have been here a lot longer.
Yeah.
And so if you just add 20,000 years time frame that people could have been here, who knows what the hell was here? How many people?
There was another island they were talking about, and they found I think they found teeth in a cave.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Maybe.
I think it was in like the 3rd episode or something. 3rd or 4th, but
I'm trying to think.
I totally forget what island they were talking about. But yeah, they found literally like teeth, and that's like that pushes us back way more than we thought.
Mm-hmm.
There was not supposed to be humans on this island.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
on the island that they thought it was an island. I think
it could have been a continent. Like that's
exactly.
That's also the thing with like Indonesia. It used to be a full continent. It was not necessarily a strand of islands. There was multiple islands, but they were way bigger than they were today. And so like literally lost continents pretty much.
Yeah.
And so that in itself is hard to wrap its mind around, because it's like, yeah, there's a continent. What even if we were hunter and gatherers at the time, what was lost at that point in time, or what could have been built there, even if it wasn't necessarily pyramid like structures, but even if it was smaller stuff, it's like, what was lost from that change globally? Like we just it's and the thing is hopefully, and it seems like more and more people are pushing for it, and more people, young people, like they've talked about, have been getting into archaeology and wanting to go down that path because of Graham Hancock and some of those guys talking about it. And they're like, this is fascinating. So it will be crazy to see in 20 years as old people get out of it from retirement, and the new generations get in, to see what might change or what might be discovered because more people are actually looking for it.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, is farther along in our lifetime goes, the more information that will come out.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. We might talk about this now, and 20 years from now, we
that
can look back at it and
better
be like,
technology is coming out. Like,
yeah,
we're going to know a lot more.
Between technology advancements to study this and the amount of people actually wanting to spend time on it, in 20 years, we might look back at this and be like, we talked about this, and we're just two kids from Indiana, and guess what? The stuff we were talking about was actually reasonably dead on.
Or we were just completely off.
or that. I mean, it's possible. We could be completely wrong, or more information gets out. We were down the right path, but a whole other thing was discovered.
Right,
and it's like, oh, okay, well, we were in the ballpark.
we were right there.
We were close, but
give us our money.
It was definitely, it's a fun topic. It really is, and that's why, like, anytime they come on that podcast or more information's found, I'm like, I definitely want to listen in just to see, because it's like I don't pay attention to it necessarily. Like, I'm not reading articles. I'm not actually active and paying attention to this stuff. So I get bits and pieces over time. So it's cool to see next time they come on. It's like, oh, what's changed in the past year and a half?
Because the show, it was kind of a slower pace,
yes,
but it's still very intriguing.
Honestly, that's why I'm not disappointed, but I'm sad that you did finish it, because it's like the whole thing is he structured it to kind of build up, hint, not necessarily give a lot of information. And then it went back up, and then it's like, this is what we're talking about. Yeah. This is the ancient apocalypse. So this is named after. This is why. This is what we think happened.
But they still don't find the place.
Well, whoa.
That ancient civilization.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It might be underwater.
Yeah. Or it could be in the Amazon.
That's true.
But, I mean, so yeah, the show the show was kind of a slower pace, but if you guys really, really want to know, I advise you.
Or you're a history nut, at least listen to it.
I advise to go to the podcast, at least, because he's just wicked smart. He just knows so much stuff that...
in general, there's a lot to learn. Even if you don't necessarily want to believe it, even just listening into the documentary, you will find out a lot more than you ever realized
100%.
when it comes to some of this stuff.
100%.
Because that is the thing, is some of the stuff just isn't talked about in history books. Mm-hmm. And you learn a lot about it. Yep. And that is the thing that's so funny, as someone that's still pretty new in their journey to life, I'm only 22. You're only 19. There's so much that you believe in high school and what you know, and then you get out, you're like, wait, I can find out so much more shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then not only that, it's like it's not curated to a curriculum, and so you find out so much more information that you just weren't aware of or accustomed to, or so very little. And then you're like, wait a second. Like just the other day, I know this has nothing to do necessarily with the topic we're talking about, but I found out that the reason behind why Oklahoma has the Panhandle and how it was initially Texas, and it was because of the slavery law at the time. They changed it and they gave up that land because slavery was only allowed or legal at the time south of the 34th parallel or whatever. So Texas was like, sorry, we'll get rid of that ground because that's north of it, so slavery is not allowed. And then no one basically had it, and it literally became no man's land. There was no law or regulation in this area for 60 plus years. It was literally the Wild West. When you think of those movies where someone walks in, they stole $5 off of you and they just shot them, and that was it. No one cared. Like that was the thing. And the thing is, that wasn't talked about in history. Like I didn't know that. Like I didn't know that there was literally a portion of the United States in its history that there was basically no law and it was just complete
Nobody
anarchy.
cared, dude.
Yeah,
It's all cowboys.
Exactly. So there's a lot to history that you don't necessarily get fully informed on just in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's fun to be able to discover all the stuff you weren't taught afterwards.
Yep.
And it's not only history, it's a lot of stuff, but it's something you don't necessarily realize as a kid because in general your mind's so much smaller. Like even as a kid, as you slowly develop a geographical map of your area, and at first it's like, I know my house.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I don't know where the hell I am, but I know my home. And then you learn your town, and then you learn your county, and then you slowly know your state, and it expands, and you have a better understanding of the world at large. And it's like, I remember at one point before I moved to Tipton, I was like, oh, I know Arcadia, I know where this is, and then I know where I lived in Tipton, but I didn't necessarily know everything or where the hell anything was. Like you slowly build that map out in your head over time, just like you do with some knowledge, even
That's
as a
like
kid.
Me going to a new county to work,
Yeah.
And you just slowly, gradually know and learn where everything is.
And that's the thing, is the same thing happens in school. You do learn more and more and more, but like we said, they kind of put you down a path, and then once you kind of get out of school, it's up to you.
It's just like that one narrow path that he was talking about. Like,
yes. And once you get out,
everybody's straightforward, and
full-fledged.
they don't look left and right.
Yeah. And then once you're out of school, it's you can know anything, and you can find out anything.
Exactly.
And so there'll be a lot that you discover kind of on your own, and that can completely change your perspectives because you were only taught this, and then you find out other information, and you're like, wow, that just changed my whole mindset on X, Y, and Z.
Like that whole show just opened my mind to so many things. I really did.
Lost history.
It is. Everything is.
Well, I do hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. I had a lot of fun. I know I didn't necessarily have to study as much as you did for this, so thank you for spending the time watching the documentary. But I hope you did have fun, though, in the process.
I'm going to finish it. Don't worry. I'll finish it.
But I hope you guys might have learned something or found something out that you didn't know, and maybe we piqued your interest in possibly diving deeper, because it is a fun subject.
It is fun.
I don't necessarily spend my life working on it, but it's fun to learn about every now and again.
Or learn it from somebody that actually does.
Yeah, exactly. So if anything, I hope this podcast piques your guys' interest to just go out there and learn something new that you didn't know. Just kind of be curious. Be curious. I think that's something nowadays, sadly, that in certain aspects has been lost, and people need to be more curious about things.
So
and more open-minded.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah.
You know?
Curious mindset and an open mindset are two great things.
Yep.
And I hope a lot of people and younger generations have that, because it's very valuable.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys have a great week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And
we'll see you next week.
Yeah, we'll see you guys all next week. Peace out, everybody.